Hey everybody, Tim here again. Seems like I'm having some technical difficulties. I apologize. For the Next Generation Season 2, Episode 16, Q Who, which to me is one of the most important episodes of Star Trek. So, as I said the first time I tried to do this video, I'm trying to save the live videos for like the two-parters or the movies or stuff, but I really enjoy seeing the comments pop up from you guys and just kind of the interaction. So I decided to do this episode live because out of any episodes for the first couple of seasons, this is probably the most important, because it basically redefined the franchise. This is the episode that introduces the Borg. So this is also Q's third appearance, which is kind of interesting because this is the episode for Q that introduces his snap, which that was kind of weak. There we go. His first two appearances, he just kind of does this, which is interesting because in Voyager, that Q, that's his motion. And when we think of Q, we always think of the snap. So for this episode, Q appears and basically just fucks everything up, does what he does best, and throws the Enterprise into the Delta Quadrant, which it's not named. In fact, I don't think they've named any of the quadrants yet, but we all know what it is. Overall, like, this episode's really good. It's really interesting. They've tried to do hive minds before in the series. There's one that sticks out in my mind where they're described as being wasp-like, but because of the budget, they didn't even show the species. We just talked to them. It's the one where Picard keeps rehearsing what to say. So they had an idea for the Borg for a long time, even going back to Conspiracy, the second to last episode of the first season. That episode was supposed to introduce the Borg. That's why it kind of ends on a cliffhanger where they start sending out the little beacons. But instead, the species ends up being almost like the Trill. I think in some Star Trek novels, they are like a byproduct of the Trill or something, because they can like go inside and grab you and use you as a host or whatever. So for whatever reason, the Borg didn't pan out for that one. But it was interesting that the final episode of Season 1, the Neutral Zone, the whole point of that episode is that on our side of the neutral zone and on the Romulan side of the neutral zone, different star bases are being like scooped up and just taken away. And then that's it. That's the last you hear about it. And then I never even realized it, but in this episode, Data mentions how an M-class planet has the same things happening. So now it's almost implied that the Borg are also in the neutral zone. I don't know. I felt like that was kind of a real stretch. I didn't really care for that part. The number one thing about this episode that, that kind of disappointed me, even as a little kid, Guinan and Q have always been my two favorite characters, just because I think they're the most interesting. And I loved their interaction in this episode, where Guinan can clearly take on Q, or at least it makes it look like she can. Like, I've always wanted just a movie or something to, like, pin these two together, like, just explaining their history. Like, I liked how Guinan was in Generations, and you kind of start to get a little bit of her backstory, and you do in some of the other episodes as well. But I want to know I forgot the name of her race. I wanted to know, like, the backstory between her planet. We know the Borg attacked, and Q. Like, did Q kind of come in and mess with things? Because, like, I love Q. Q's my favorite character. And we only ever see him messing with, like, Picard. Like, yeah, he's in Deep Space Nine and Voyager. But we never really see him messing with other species. Because I remember when they were first starting... Oh, it was when Enterprise came out. And they were first starting to entertain the idea, like, oh, why do Klingons, like, have smooth foreheads in some, but rigid foreheads in other? And, like, in Deep Space Nine, Worf is just like, we don't talk about that. But, like, they never... Like, once Enterprise came on, they started, like, oh, it was augmentation and stuff. I was, like, super simple. I was like, why can't Q just mess with the Klingons, too? Like, he got into a fight with one, and, oh, now you guys look like humans. Like, I don't know. I thought it was super easy and super funny, but they had to make it more scientific and harder to explain. So, I don't know. I always wanted to know, like, did Q go to that home world of Guinan and just was messing with them and was like, you know what, I'm going to bring the Borg to you too. And maybe Q was responsible for her species, like annihilation. Like, I don't know. They could have done something, but this is the only episode where we ever see Guinan and Q pitted against each other. I really like how dark Q is in this episode too, because like I love John Delancey, especially as an actor. And the first 2 times we've seen Q, he's always like the kid, he's the whatever. Whereas in this one, especially the scene where he's like kicked back in the chair and it's super dark and he's like backlit, and Picard's like, "Is this a game?" And he's like, "No. This is as real as it gets." And you're like, fuck, like, what is Q doing now? And, like, Q's pretty dark in this one. And I find him to be more interesting in that aspect. Like, I like Q as being childish, but when he's dark, it's scary to see him come out. Sorry, I've been really sick lately, so you guys... as for the Borg itself, like, I actually really like how they're portrayed. Some people say, like, they were kind of weak the first few episodes and they didn't really hit their stride until later on. I mean, for me, like, I think it's that way for everything, but for a first introductory episode, I think they did fine. The suits basically stay the same, the characters stay the same. We don't have the resistance is futile yet, but I mean, they kind of imply it. We're getting there, which is funny because I forgot which movie it was. But Spock actually says that in one of the early movies. I think my favorite scene, it's a super easy fake shot, but you see Riker, Data, and Worf on the cube ship, or the Borg cube, and they're standing there and they look over and then the camera just zooms out and you can see like how big it is. It's a really easy green screen technique, but I don't know, you hadn't quite seen a shot like that in Star Trek yet, and I really enjoyed how they portrayed that. Same thing with the Borg nursery, which, again, you can tell they hadn't quite ironed out exactly how they were doing the Borg, because we don't know that they assimilate people yet. This episode almost implies that this is just the Borg. They're their own species, and they're basically born that way, to quote Lady Gaga. Because you actually see like the infants with the Borg pieces on them, and I'm sure it's been retconned saying that they've gotten infants and they're trying to assimilate infants in that way. But it's just interesting to me that they didn't have all of the ideas, but they had a pretty set idea on how to handle the species. And like I said, this episode really kind of redefined Star Trek, just because we've had some big bads before, and every series they kind of redo the bad. Like the original series, it was all about the Klingons. With the Next Generation, we brought a Klingon on board because they're not that bad anymore. And then for a brief second, it was the Ferengi, and then Deep Space Nine comes along. Oh no, we have a Ferengi on board. They're not really that bad. And kind of the same thing with the Borg. The Borg are the big bad for a long time, and then we get to Voyager, and it's like, oh no, now we have a Borg on board. It's no big deal. So they're always trying to evolve the villains of the species, but for the Borg, I felt like they do a really, really good job. And they kind of stretch it as well, because the Borg are the main species, the main villain of Voyager. The Borg have their own movie. And even in Enterprise, like, I won't spoil it too much, but when we get to that point, I mean, the Borg are in Enterprise. Chance, I totally agree. Like, I love Whoopi Goldberg as Guinan. Like, she's my favorite character. But Borg conspiracy, going through my notes real quick. But yeah, other than that, for those who have seen this episode, like I said, to me, this is probably in the top episodes of The Next Generation. I mean, it might get knocked down by episodes like Borg or Best of Both Worlds, stuff like that. But to me, the introduction of the Borg it's a huge role. Because those other villains, like... well, I guess no, never mind, I'll take that back. Because the Romulans in the original series, that was our first real encounter with them. Because they didn't know that they were a branch of the Vulcan species. So Never mind. But like Klingons, when we first meet them in the original series, everybody kind of already knows Klingons, and nobody's surprised by their culture or barbarism or whatever. But when we first encounter the Borg, we have no idea what to expect. So it's interesting that it's new to them, it's new to us, and where it can go from there. I should have looked it up to see when the next Borg episode was, but I didn't, because I suck as a host. So for those who have seen this episode, what did you guys think of the Borg? Do you guys like how they're handled? Do you like their first episodes? Go ahead, let me know in the comments below. I can hear myself. Thank you guys for all the YouTube subscriptions. I really appreciate that. Thank you to my husband who just logged in and he's watching right now. I tried to bribe some of you saying I'd do another shirtless video if I hit 100 subscribers in YouTube. Doesn't seem to be working, but whatever. Thank you guys for subscribing anyway. It means a lot to me. Thank you guys for the comments. Thank you guys for watching the live videos. I probably won't do another live one until the Season 3 finale, which is a two-parter. But yeah, thank you guys for everything. I really appreciate you guys watching and just interacting. I really, really do appreciate it. So go ahead, leave some comments below. I will be interacting throughout the day, and thank you guys. I'll see you next time for the Samaritan Snare.